Welcome to the Breakout Session 12, Governance and Political Economy. I'd like to give the floor to the Chair, Dr. Mahbubul Mokaddam, former Chairman, the Department of Economics, University of Dhaka, and discussant Tawfiqul Islam Khan, Senior Research Fellow, Center of Policy Dialogue. Thank you.
Good morning to you all, our honorable discussants and paper presenters, and those of you who have come here to join this discussion and make useful comments also, I hope. Good morning to you again. Let me set the rules of the game. I, as a chair, will have 10 minutes, 5 minutes before the opening and 5 minutes after the end. And 4 papers will be presented, each with 10 minutes time. And one panelist is with us, so we have much time for him. He will have 15 minutes. And then we can take up open discussion from floor, possibly 5 to 7 people, and some from Zoom also can be presenting comments from Zoom. And timekeeper will help me with the time signals. After 5 minutes of each presentation, he will give one signal, or he will give one signal, and after the last minute before the end, that is 9th minute, she will give another signal. So within 10 minutes, the presenters will have to wrap up. With this, with these rules, we can start. The open discussion from the floor, 5 to 7 people can participate. They can talk for 2 to 3 minutes. Okay? This is our rules. Now, let me give some opening introductory remarks. The general theme of the conference is stability in the economic and political landscape. It is the whole conference. That is very suitable for Bangladesh at present, I think. Bangladesh is actually now going through a process of transition from non-democracy to democracy. The issue is here whether its fragile economy and political landscape can show resilience and through that process become stable again. For us, Bangladesh, this is the main context. In this context, governance becomes a main issue. Why? Because the governing power is there, the interim government. Let us call him the governing power. This governing power must have a collective united vision. If they are divided, then there will be problem. They must have a collective united vision. They must have the capacity to implement that vision. And they must have commitment to that vision, which should be manifested in delivering the right services in the right time in order to make the transition successful. This whole framework is a governance framework which can be examined in case of specific case studies. And in this session, we have 4 papers who will study specific aspects of governance of specific projects. I'm not going to what they are going to study and what are their conclusions, but I'm saying they will study the general aspects, the aspects of vision, capacity, commitment, delivering services, becoming accountable and becoming transparent, etc. In this, among the 4 papers, one is from Bangladesh, which will study the mega projects, 3 mega projects of Bangladesh: Padda Bridge, Karnafuli Tunnel, and Dhaka Metro. And possibly they will bring out the governance failures and how to overcome them and what lessons we can learn from those failures. And we will have a nice discussion after that. Hoping with that and closing with these things, I introduce now the papers. First, I will call, who is the first? Akash. So Akash can present his paper. The title of his paper is on, I think, what is that?
Silicosis. Silicosis.
Huh?
It's a disease, silicosis.
Silicosis. I think it is on silicon miners disease, which was discussed in the parliament, and that parliament tried to visualize a vision for solving them, and there were various arguments, counter arguments, and framing of that vision. So let us hear from Akash about this very interesting parliament textual analysis. Thank you.
So you just
Akash,
have to,
it's your.
with this you go forward, we go backward. Okay. Can I have a mic? Oh, yes. I'll turn it on. Hello everyone. Myself Akash Pal, and this paper is co-authored by my supervisor Pratap Chandra Mohanty, and title of the this paper is Silicosis Awareness and Policy in the Indian Parliament, text data analysis. So to start with, I think in our daily lives we all have seen marvels, stones, gems. So this disease silicosis is related to mining and the processing of those marvels, gems, and all. So silicosis is an occupational lung disease among the miners, those mining workers who are mining stones, uh, working in the crushing units, in the processing of those tiles, marvels, gems. They got infected with the disease as these marvels are the stones have a high content of silica particles on those. So when the mining happens, these tiny molecules of silica get mixed with the air, and when they breathe, so the silica particles got accumulated into the lungs of those mining workers, making it over the time difficult for them to breathe. So there have been reports by many international uh, institutes and communities. They have declared silicosis as a challenge for mining workers. So for the workers' rights. So in India, we have Factories Act and Mines Act. But the problem with those acts is that they are mainly for the organized sector workers, and not for the unorganized ones. I was watching a presentation earlier. So the presenter told us that there are 85% of informal workers in Bangladesh as well. In India, we have around 90%. So the problem is the acts that were supposed to protect the workers are not actually being implemented on them. So how will we protect them if they are not made for them? So there are studies who highlighted that like 3 millions of workers in India are at a high risk of silica exposure. Mainly, those workers are working in the mining, quarrying, and construction sectors. So these are the visual representation of workers who are working in the stone crushing units and the mining area. So you can see the dust clouds. Imagine working in those conditions. And you can see from the picture, they are not using any protective gears or all. So this is a very severe problem. So mainly the problem of silicosis exists in the three stone mining problem. Like again, them as gems, the slate pencil mining, and the marble mining. And these problems are prevalent in the north and the western India, the state of Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, and Rajasthan. So the prevalence of silicosis in India. So there have been some industrial hygiene medical surveys by the National Institute of Occupational Health and National Institute of Miners Health, and they have surveyed local regions and found that approximate 30 to 40% of prevalence is among the mining workers who are found to have silicosis among them. And similar studies have found, like in flour mill workers, pottery workers, stone carving, ordnance factory workers, and they all had significant amount of silicosis patient working in those industries. So I looked for the Bangladesh and I found, as I have mentioned, 85% of workers are in formal sectors and the laws don't apply to them. And like Bangladesh is known for its textile industry, and in the jeans industry, I found a paper. They mentioned that they have a sandblasting procedure. So this includes uh, blasting the clothes with the some sands. So it makes the workers working on those industry vulnerable to silicosis problem. Similar problem exists in the brick making, ceramics, and other industries. So, why parliamentary debate? Because people sitting in the parliament are supposed to protect those workers. And what could be more worthy tool than the question answer, making them responsible for those problems. So MPs asked to ruling parties about the problem, and these question answer tools have been used in all the democratic setup to make ruling party liable to those problems. So I have used these uh, parliamentary question answer to look into the problem. So I have used extracted the data from the digital censored um, platform, which is a digital platform of Parliament of India's data, and mined extracted the data from them. I've used the Prisma framework, like similar, not exactly Prisma, but derived similar setup, extracted problems. Then I looked into the relevant questions, and eventually I um, found a 131 question answer. The 83 from the lower house of Lok Sabha, where people get elected by the people. MP got elected from the people, and the Rajya Sabha, where they are nominated by the state legislative. The 48 questions from the Rajya Sabha. So I looked into the what are common topics among the parliamentary debates, and what kind of the certain types of people are found to be more likely to discuss these topics or not. So to get the idea of the silicosis, sorry, STM, structural topic modeling, it is a topic modeling method in which we extract the data, and if suppose we have a n number of documents, then the n number of documents are supposed to have m number of topics, and they might, and each document might have m or less than m number of topics, and in each topic there is a distribution of words. So basically it's a dual distribution of in the topics in the documents and the words in the topic. So you can get the topic from the words itself. STM is a latest topic modeling method in which we account for the metadata of the document as well, like what in the setup of the parliamentary debates, what kind of people are asking those questions, and whether it's a Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, etc. So this is a general timeline of the trend of the questions being asked in the Parliament of India, and in the recent year it got increased, but after 2018, which was the year of uh, in India, where the labor codes were formulated, and after 2018, you can see that decrease in the number of question answers being asked related to silicosis in India. So I divided these into the four zones. You can see from till 1980, there was only one or two questions being asked in the Parliament of India. Then there were some reforms and studies by NIOH and the NIMH. They found the prevalence of silicosis among the mining workers, and the number of questions in the Parliament got increased because of those studies. And after the 2009, there was some reforms in the Compensation Act for the workers. Then there was a significant increase in the trend. This is a regional distribution of the question answer in India. So basically, you can see that these question answers were centered on the north and the western part of India. So I looked into the basically when you use STM, you look for the minimum limit of frequency limit of word those you are interested to work on, and I got not to minimum or not too high to make the relevant corpus of terms in the study. So I used a minimum frequency limit of 5, like any word which are occurring in the minimum of 5 articles. I kept those words and looked into it. Sorry.
Time is over.
Yeah, but just 1 minute. So I found out 9 topics, significant topics like silica exposure, mine safety, silicosis compensation. Those were the prevalent one, and you can see the occupational hazard and worker welfare were being discussed very less in the over the time period. I looked for all the 9 topics. I looked for the trend, and you can see from the this figure this compensation.
10 minutes is over or 5 minutes is over?
Yes.
So you must wrap up.
Okay, so
quickly.
1 or 2 minutes. So here you can see the worker welfare were discussed very less, and there was an increase in the compensation discussion after the 2010. And initially they were discussing about the like worker mining and labor problems in the parliamentary debates. This is the just a table. I'll just
You just go for your conclusion.
okay.
The data we will see later.
Okay. So the from the topics, and we conclude that they were highlighting the problem silica exposure, mine safety, and compensation, while they were not discussing more about the workers' welfare in the parliament. And there have been some temporal shift in from the studies that have been taken in India regarding the industrial hygiene survey, and these have made MPs in India to discuss those problems. I think that would be.
Thank you, Akash. The second presenter is, I think the paper is the impact of sovereign defaults on political stability in emerging market. Huh?
It's the first one. Yes.
This is an interesting paper. It will concentrate on debt default, national debt default, sovereign default. So
You just have to go forward with this
Bangladesh, for Bangladesh it is
Okay,
relevant
forward and
because
back. Yes.
many people are
Check
claiming
the-
that Bangladesh is
Yes,
going
it's
to
already-
face like that, like Sri Lanka. Okay, let's hear from her.
Shall I start? Picture this scene: protesters breaking into the president's house and swimming in his private pool. This is a scene from Sri Lanka, my home country, 2 years ago at the height of the debt default. Good morning, my name is Roji, and today I'll be presenting my research on the impact of sovereign defaults on the political stability of developing countries. So when I looked into this topic of sovereign debt, I realized that this is not just a problem in Sri Lanka. In fact, one statistic found that over half of low-income developing countries are at high risk or in debt distress. So the problem with sovereign debt for developing countries compared to advanced economies, which actually run on a lot of debt, is that these countries are much more volatile. Their economies rely on the confidence of investors. And when they face debt problems, it becomes a very big problem for them. Until recently, sovereign debt was largely seen through an economic lens. So they didn't really look at the broader political and social costs associated with defaults. And by defaults here, just to clarify, I mean a country is not able to pay its debt as promised at the given timeline. So when this happens, there are going to be a lot more costs than just the economic costs. So my research will be focusing mainly on this aspect and focusing on the case of developing economies. So to conceptualize my research, I've given this diagram. So as you can see, clearly there's a complex relationship between the economic and political state of a country. And today's political economy is going to affect the future as well. So what happens when there's a sovereign default? That itself is going to have impacts on the political and economic states. So my research will be focusing on what's shown in the red color arrow here, which is looking at the political impacts of the sovereign default. So as we understand intuitively, whenever there's an economic crisis, so there's losses to jobs, there's high cost of living, this can cause political tensions. People will come out, protest, things like that. But more than that, in a sovereign default, it's not just these costs. A sovereign default is when a country is not able to honor its debt obligations. When that happens, that can reputationally damage a government. It can be seen as incompetent. So that has a political cost. And when you move on to the restructuring, which is what happens after the default, whose fault is it? Who bears the losses, the creditors or the debtors? These are all very political questions. So this is what I'll be exploring through my research. And essentially, this has an impact on how we talk about the recovery after the crisis, as well as the reforms that might come. So my research objectives then, in looking at the primary objective, is to assess the impact of sovereign defaults on the political stability of low and middle income countries. And as a secondary objective, I actually look into the appropriate measures and methods to examine political instability, because as we all know, there's no one measure for what is political instability. It can materialize in a variety of different ways. So moving on to the nitty-gritties of my methodology, I've mainly used a panel fixed effects logistic model. And that is supplemented by a correlated random effects probit model. So these are looking at probabilistic kinds of regressions. And the data is focusing on low and middle income countries from 1975 to 2018. The most important explanatory variable in my study is the default status. That is a country in a state of default in a given year, or is it not? And how does that affect political instability? So that is measured by these two variables, source of leader support and anti-government protests. So to describe the source of leadership support a little bit more, that actually looks at how the societal groups support political leaders and how that changes over time. So that's a little bit different from just looking at leadership turnover or how the government changes. And that is more sensitive to these kinds of changes that might happen. So this is my estimated equation. As you can see from the Y variable, it shows the dependent variable, which is political instability. And then on the other side of the equation, you get the explanatory variables. Apart from the default variable, we have things like inflation, presence of armed conflicts, and political regime. And these are the control variables. So an interesting finding that I came across when I was trying to estimate this model is, I mentioned earlier that I used protest as one of the political instability indicators. That didn't really meet the assumptions required by this model. And that has implications on the results that I'll be discussing later. So going forward, I'll be discussing the results based on the source of leadership change related instability variable. To give a quick overview about the sample, as you can see, sovereign defaults over time have sort of come up and gone down as a sort of a wave, right? And there's a regional breakdown given here in different colors. As you can see, African countries and Latin American countries especially have faced a lot of debt defaults. In the 1980s, for instance, there was a huge increase in the defaults that happened. So this, again, has implications on the methodology, as well as when we talk about the findings and the results, which I'll be talking in the next couple of slides. So yes, the main analysis, which was done from the regression output, this shows the SE logic model and the CRE probit model. So as you can see, there is a somewhat significant, let me phrase it like that, relationship between the default status and political instability. So as economists know, 10% level of significance is not really considered a very solid result, right? So it's difficult to say when you look at the data overall that there is a strong relationship between political instability and defaults. But I wanted to go deeper into this. So I did a subsample analysis. I looked at things, breaking it down by region, by income levels and time periods. So when I did that, I realized in terms of the regional impacts, the Asian region actually had a significant impact on their political stability after a sovereign default. So the results showed that there was an approximately 15% higher probability of facing a source of leadership change in the subsequent period after default. But this wasn't the case for Latin America and Africa, which I thought was interesting because most of the defaults happened in that region. So why is this? Again, I'll be discussing this more during the implications. But moving on to the time period analysis. So 1975 to 89 period, that showed a significant relationship between defaults and political instability. So much so that there was an 8% higher probability of a source of leadership change occurring after a default in this period. In 1990 to 2005, that wasn't the case. And in the final period, 2005 onwards, the model actually refused to or was not able to produce a result because there were so few sovereign defaults happening during that period. So that shows again that this model may not be the most suitable to look at very isolated incidences like that in certain periods. Finally, looking at the income groups, another interesting finding was that middle-income countries were a lot more sensitive to sovereign defaults in terms of their political impact compared to low-income countries. So initially, I looked at just the middle-income countries, removing the low-income groups from the sample. And then I also removed the least developed countries from the sample as well. And both showed that there was, in the case of the middle-income countries, a 6% higher probability of having political instability in the aftermath of a default. So what do all of these results mean? In this slide, I'll be summarizing or interpreting my results. So essentially, yes, we can say that sovereign defaults tend to have certain political costs. However, like I noticed doing the subsample analysis, this tends to vary with the region, the time period, as well as the income levels. What does the time period result mean? Well, during this period, actually, 1975 to 89, global debt in developing countries was a major issue. There were these austerity movements happening in Latin American regions. There was a lot of political resistance, and it was a hot topic, essentially. So it's understandable that this period shows higher political tensions. In terms of the regional differences, yes, Asia did have a significant result and other regions didn't, but that doesn't mean that there was no political impact in that region. Essentially, it could mean that political instability materializes in different forms, and maybe it was not captured by this variable that I have selected. So we need to be careful going further and doing studies about this. And finally, looking at the income levels, the reason why middle-income countries could be more sensitive compared to low-income countries in terms of political instability could be due to the relative changes in the living standards. So in a lot of middle-income countries, we see already there's extensive welfare given. There's already a certain living standard that's achieved. When you go through a debt default, suddenly you lose access to more borrowing. Suddenly you need to cut down on these things. And when those things happen, there's a shift in the people's living standards, and that could cause political tensions. Not just that, when you go into the negotiation process to get out of this situation, the conditions under which middle-income countries are treated are much more strict and harsher than low-income countries. So all of this could contribute to the differences in the political instability situation. Methodologically, also, like I mentioned, this regression type model didn't seem to be necessarily a good fit to look at the in-depth analysis of certain regions or to look at certain countries. However, to get an overall idea, an overview of the situation, it is actually a really good starting point. So doing further research, it's important to identify specific indicators that are suitable for different countries and regions and time periods, and look into alternative methods as well. Actually, right now, experimental approaches are coming up as an alternative to this kind of method. It does take a lot more time and effort to conduct those kinds of methodology and analysis, but it is a good way to look at the in-depth situation in countries. So to conclude very quickly then, yes, sovereign defaults do have political costs, but they tend to vary with the context. And what this means for policymakers, for leaders, for stakeholders in negotiation processes is they need to give due regard to this political cost. They need to make sure that the vulnerable people are protected. There's transparency, communication, and a real effort to rebuild that trust that was lost during the sovereign default. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a wonderful paper. Let's go to the third paper. Third paper is by whom? The title is on mega projects and their governance puzzle.
Mic chalo. Sorry, please.
Okay, yes. Feeling my voice.
আমার মাইকটা কমাই দিতে পারবো একটু
একটু স্যারকে জিজ্ঞেস করি।
আচ্ছা আচ্ছা
Your other co-authors are here.
Yes, sir.
Who are they? Can we see them? Okay.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Tomalika Sharkar. I'm honored and excited to present our paper. Our group consists of 4 members. Our first co-author, Barna Khanum, then second co-author, Tasnim Khan, and last but not the least, MD Akib Iqbal. Our topic is mega projects of Bangladesh and the governance puzzle, corruption, institutional failures, policy strategies for enhanced transparency and efficiency. Let's start our presentation with the introduction. What does a development mean to a country? Is it infrastructural development, namely visible development, which advances our urbanization, or the in-person development which advances our lifestyle and that ensures our basic rights? In the context of Bangladesh, we have huge lack of invisible development because our indicator of development is GDP, growing economy, and establishing several mega projects. If the economy of Bangladesh is compared with Rostov's growth model, we can see Bangladesh stays at the takeoff position, being a middle-income country right now. The situation created because one-party rule from the 2019 to 2024 and broken parliamentary system, corruption, and absence of opposition party. Our study analyzed the cost and benefit of in-persons and grassroots peoples. Let's move on to the objectives of the paper and the central research question. Our question is, how does Bangladesh's one-party rule contribute to corruption, lack of transparency, and the suppression of public grievances overshadowed by development projects? This study will tend to find out how a democratic process weakened and destroyed by the one-party rule, how lack of participation of the opposition caused corruption, absence of accountability and transparency, how infrastructure hushed up the sufferings of the grassroots peoples of the country. Okay, let's move on to the methodology, which is very important. This paper is qualitative in nature. The paper evaluates grassroots analysis by focusing on the institutional gaps and governance failure in several development projects in Bangladesh over the last 15 years. For data collection, the paper followed a mixed method. Secondary data is collected from the policy papers, government papers, newspapers, journals, and many more. Primary data is collected from the personal interview by cluster sampling. We have chosen the cluster sampling because the population was very large and geographically dispersed. Okay. After conducting our literature review, we found that there are 3 types of mega projects in Bangladesh currently. Number 1, which is complete success. Number 2, mid-level success, we can say. And number 3, complete failure. That is why we have chosen 3 mega projects. Number 1, Padma Multipurpose Bridge. number 2, Dhaka Metro Rail, and number 3, Kanufuli Tunnel. For the Padma Bridge project analysis, a dedication population for data collection was selected on the basis of 3 aspects. Number 1, people who are running new business after the inauguration of the project. Number 2, people who couldn't maintain their old business and already switched their profession. Number 3, those people who are involved in Maoist tourism industry. Secondly, for the community-based development and exploring governance puzzle in Metro Rail, 2 kind of population are taken into account. Number 1, who are the daily passengers of the Metro Rail and employees. And number 2, employees of the Metro Rail. Thirdly and lastly, evaluating the community-based development and governance puzzle of Kanufuli Tunnel, a population is selected who are drivers of the commercial buses on the Dhaka to Chittagong roads. After that, this study is analyzed through the lens of principal agent theory. Principal agent theory explains how the miscommunication and mismanagement happens when government bodies to grassroots people. This study is an addition to provide a critical understanding of Keynesian economy and association with byproducts of investment of public money, foreign aid on mega project development and overall development of the people from every class of representation. Okay. Moving on to the key findings. First, navigating the governance issues affecting Bangladesh progress. In Bangladesh, opposition parties always maintain their role like a dead body. When the role of opposition party is absent, the ruling party manipulates. First governance puzzle is unnecessary ministries and wastage of national budget. There were 47 ministries in Bangladesh, but those are not necessary. Even though there were a number of ministries which can be included within a single ministry like food and agriculture. The next puzzle in the 5-year plan of the previous regime. They designed plan after plan. They proposed their plans but did not implement it. That is why they overlapped with each other. Okay. In the next section, named Implementing Development Projects and Governance, we found that there were huge lack of planning, lack of after-effect analysis, and higher expense in projects other than any developing countries like India, Malaysia. But the question is, why this kind of puzzles like situation where there is so many wings of the government? This lacking in the government's governance procedure. It's quite clear. Moving on to the next part, institutional failures, a barrier to sustainable development in Bangladesh. In this chapter, we tried to find out the institutional challenges, gaps, and systematic policy mistakes or failures regarding the mega projects of Bangladesh. Firstly, the lives of people of southwestern region of Bangladesh changed dramatically because of the Padma Bridge. During construction, corruption and mismanagement in the financial aspect of Bangladesh, Padma Bridge has resulted a large amount of cost overruns from estimated 10,161 crore to BDT 30,193 crore. The scenario in Mawa Old Ferryghat is hard. Especially previous government has no specific resettlement plan for the small business owners, hawkers or daily laborers who work to trawlers and coolies, and some medium enterprises suffered the worst as because many of them lost their only source of income. Authority institutions failed to provide them with a specific and realistic repatriation strategy. A small tea stall owner who ran his business in Mawaghat told us that we died when the Padma Bridge is established. And so also there is a criticism over the land acquisitions repatriation efforts. Also recent initiatives to make Mawaghat a tourism center receiving concerns because previous regime has nepotism here and they lead to the unworthy parties members who involved in extortion from the small businesses. Secondly, being a PPP project, Metro Rail has continuous delays and mismanagement during the construction in every step, which is a remarkable cost overruns from 21,985 BD2 crore to 33,472 crore, which clearly projected the high level of corruption. Citizens of Bangladesh receiving major facilities and enjoying swift travel via this Metro Rail. Except corruption, mismanagement, and citizens are much satisfied with the project as our data collection shows. Thirdly, if we talk about Kanufuli Tunnel, it can be a white elephant for Bangladesh as this project bearing daily 27 lakhs of loss and creating there is also a bridge named Shah Amanat Bridge on the Karnofoli River, and creating another bridge or tunnel on the same river caused a huge disruption on the river flow. Clearly shows the improper planning. A bus driver in a personal interview said that due to the high toll rates, commercial vehicles are not using the tunnel. And now this tunnel has turned into a rich people's travel destination. This tunnel is in critical condition where it is bearing high maintenance cost with very limited revenue. Thus, it became clear that there was a major fault in tunnel's feasibility study, and that is why it resulted in a potentially failed project. Moving on to the next chapter, the citizens' perspective and community-based development on the infrastructure projects in Bangladesh. If we talk about Padma Bridge, people rated it 10 on 10 for the transportation, but in the fiscal year 24 to 25, government started an initiative to run Mawaghat into a tourist destination and create employment here. But the sad thing is, political consortium badly played here, and two groups of one political party clashed over the lease land, and which made the 26 lakh project into a 1 crore 60 lakh project. The situation created a huge suffering for the grassroots people. Second thing is, only 3 specific areas of the ferryghat are about to lease, but those who take the lease grab the whole area and make stalls over here and there. That scenario, and taking illegal money from the small businesses. Thirdly, the scenario ultimately reduced business owners' income. That is why they are creating crimes. And fourthly, okay, can I get 1 minute?
You carry on.
Okay. Fourthly, road accidents on the Mawag Expressway is become an alarming issue, and government is not concerned about the fact, and no commercial bus owners are punished for the breaking rules, as they are being businessmen who funds for the political party. Lastly, lack of after effect analysis on the Mawaghat. But the situation for small business is different, and as the only resort
You should concentrate on ranking of the 3 projects. Huh?
Okay,
Which one is the worst and which one is the best?
clearly, Karnofoli Tunnel is the worst, and people and commercial bus drivers and the passengers not satisfied with the project.
Okay.
If we talk about the Dhaka Metro Rail, passengers are much satisfied with the swift travel, but the problem is they are facing problem with vending machines and MRT pass issues and ticket issues. Also, if we talk about Padma Bridge, the low-income peoples and the hawkers and the daily laborers from the ghat areas who didn't received any kind of repatriation strategy. Okay. Moving on to our conclusion, we can say proper planning, improved monitoring, incentive alignment, transparency mechanism, strengthening accountability, encouraging PPP, and role of opposition can solve the issues. If we want to conclude the presentation, we can say the fragile governance, corruption around these projects, institutional problems, victimization of the local people are often unchecked. Statesmen promoted here crony capitalism for their own survival, and the continuous delays in projects made cost overrun, which fall Bangladesh in a debt trap. Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone,
Thank you.
for hearing me.
So we will have now the last paper in the Zoom, I think.
Yes.
Okay. The paper is on the role of governance in assuaging the effect of climate change and global uncertainty on household consumption. Insight from selected African countries. The presenter is Richardson Kojo Edeme and Sulemana Mumuni, Department of Economics, from Nigeria. Okay, we can hear him.
Dr. Richardson, can you is sharing a screen?
Are we in order?
Dr. Richardson, we can hear you. You can start, sir.
Okay. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can hear you.
Okay, good morning. Yeah, I'm Richardson Kojo Edeme. I'm presenting a paper on the role of governance in assuaging the effect of climate change and global uncertainty on household consumption. The paper basically is from selected African countries. Now, why the motivation for the study is based on the fact that over the years, especially in recent times, it has been observed that so many African countries are facing some challenges. These challenges range from climate change in the form of a change in weather, climate change in the form of flood, climate change in terms of a change in temperature, and this has affected the economy, which has also been shifted to the household. And beyond this climate change issue, there's also the issue of a global uncertainty brought about by change in economic policies and political instability. We are living witness to what is happening or what has happened as far as the global financial crisis is concerned. We're also aware of what is happening, the tension between China and other countries. We also know the situation of what is happening when it comes to debt crisis, and there's also the Russia-Ukraine war, and currently there's Israeli Hamas conflict. Now these are challenges, or these are events that have had negative consequence on the economic performance, which has been shifted to the household consumption. So, and because of these things, most households are suffering because in terms of the ability to consume or to purchase some of the daily needs, they are suffering. And recently, we are saying that, or the argument that to overcome these challenges, which is the climate change and the global uncertainty, the governance can also have a role to play, because through governance, a lot of foundations can be laid. Through governance, the drivers or the initial conditions for economic development can also be laid, because there's a connection between trying to sustain the environment in terms of governance and trying to establish the negative consequence of the global uncertainty and climate change. Now, in Africa, when you come down to Africa, although they have been struggling to ensure that there's improvement in the institutional quality, and which is a way, because without this institutional quality, their vision of trying to achieve economic agenda by the year 2033 will be a mirage. And so that is why we feel that there's a link, there's a need for them to build their resilience when it comes to global uncertainty and climate change. There's a need for a link or a study linking climate change, this global uncertainty, and household consumption in relation to governance. And that is why the objective of this paper is of twofold. One, we try to examine the effect of climate change and economic policy uncertainty on household consumption. Then the second one is trying to look at the moderation role of governance in the climate change global policy and household relationship. Now, when it comes to literature review, we try to present some theoretical link or theoretical framework trying to link the relationship between long-term development and uncertainty. And because when there's uncertainty, that means there's a shock on the household consumption. And some of these households may not have the ability to overcome this. And that is where the government has to provide the needed quality, institutional quality. Now, when it comes to economic literature, and political literature, we review some studies in relation, look at those studies that look at the relationship between climate change and household consumption. I've also looked at some studies that have demonstrated that macroeconomic stability or uncertainty also influence household consumption. Now, but one thing is clear, that from the literature reviewed, we discovered that no study has tried to link global uncertainty, climate change, and household consumption in relation to climate change. And that is where we feel that is the gap this study is trying to fill.
You have 5 more minutes.
Now, this is our modest presentation. Now, and because it's based on selected countries, our estimation strategy was based on panel-corrected estimation model. Now, what does the result show? Now, before the main result, we try to do look at the behavior of the variables, and that is demonstrated by the results. That is the descriptive summary statistics, which and the correlation metrics, which is try to establish the correlation between the dependent and independent variables. Now, the main results. Now, because now we presented the result in twofold. One, climate change, global uncertainty in the absence of governance, and we try to moderate the governance indicator as far as the household consumption and climate change and global policy uncertainty is concerned. And basically, in the absence of corruption, which is shown by the result, that the 3 indicators of climate change, which are CO2 emission, temperature, and precipitation, that they have a negative effect on household consumption. So we try to look at when we moderated the effect by adding governance. We found out that apart from precipitation, other variables of climate change in relation to governance has a positive effect on household consumption. But the result has demonstrated that, even though that there's a positive relationship when correlated, it has not done enough when it comes to reducing the negative effects or trying to assuage the negative effect of climate change and global uncertainty and household consumption. So, in conclusion, and that's why we're saying that in the absence of corruption, climate change and global uncertainty has negative consequence on household consumption. And even though we try to moderate, governance may play a good role or positive role, but they have not done enough when it comes to assuaging the negative consequence of climate change and household consumption as far as African countries concerned. And that is why we are saying that good governance is crucial in African global economic policy uncertainty while trying to improve the household consumption. And that is why we are saying that African government should adopt effective policy response to accommodate the negative consequence of this global economic shock, as well as trying to improve governance so as to reduce the negative consequence of the climate change and global uncertainty on household consumption in Africa. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, everybody. We have heard 4 papers, one concentrating on a public health issue, the occupational hazard of the silicon miners with lungs problem. But that was not the main thing. Main thing was how it was discussed in the parliament and how the issues were debated and how much importance was given to that issue, public health issue. The second paper, that was by Akash Pal. The second paper was about sovereign debt, which was a neat paper, and we heard from it about 2 kinds of responses. One response from middle-income countries, which is more susceptible to such problems, but least-income countries are not. But and the author has tried to explain why in the middle-income countries the responses in terms of instability is higher. And the third paper was from which one? From Bangladesh. From Bangladesh, about 3 mega projects. And they tried to rank the problem of governance in terms of problems and failures in governance. And they gave the highest mark to Padda Bridge, and the second highest to Metro, and the last to the tunnel, Kornofuli Tunnel. Probably the Kornofuli Tunnel is by now proved to be a least beneficial project in terms of benefits to the aimed at. And the fourth presentation from Nigeria was trying to find out why governance can make a difference on the impact of climate crisis upon household consumptions. Now, this is the general things which were presented here. Now, our panelists or discussant, Tawfiqul Islam Khan, who will speak in more details about all those papers. Floor to Tawfiq.
Thank you. I think, first of all, thanks to Sanem for inviting us, but more thanks to Sanem to organize this conference on a regular basis, where researchers can come together and discuss their works together. And it is fascinating to see that how 4 papers coming from 4 countries, and at least from 2 regions in that way, and still come up with common understanding and lessons to be learned. I will try to discuss these papers in 2 segments. First is on I'll try to address each paper individually. So let me start with the 4th one, since the 4th paper is online. Dr. Edeme, can you hear me? Dr. Richardson?
Is
He
this
joined
mic
again. I think
connected?
No, he is there.
Yeah, he
I
joined.
can
Dr.
see-
Richardson, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, thank you very much. No, I think this is an excellent paper. This is very well structured, and you have clearly said the objectives, methodologies, and how you have progressed. But one thing that puzzled me in the end, when you were interpreting the studies, you said the absence of governance, carbon emission, and precipitation improves household consumption in Africa. Absence of governance, or am I interpreting it, reading it right? Can you respond to that, Dr. Richardson?
That
This is page number in your paper. I think that is also a summary of your slide, I can see. So I think you found that it is important to have good quality governance or good governance in that way, no?
He has written negative correlation between
Yeah.
good governance and household level consumption.
hello.
So I think the way you have presented is that the positive, better governance helps consumption. So that I think you just have to look into the way you are interpreted the results. So this is number one. And thing is that also that later you have actually written in the next paragraph. The paper is not probably with everyone, but I have the advantage of having that paper. You have also written that global economic policy uncertainty and negative. So my point is, I think it's about the articulation and interpretation, but I think you have pretty well established the relationships in that way. The only comment I think I have for you on the other side is that you also interpret that this is also part of average consumption. So it can be a misleading, particularly when where inequality is more. I think in some of the African countries we have also seen that. But generally, I think you can also interpret that since it's a consumption expenditure or consumption is measured with consumption expenditure, I think your result is I think approved in that way to interpret it as a welfare indicator. But I think those nuances can improve your paper. So now I'm moving to the paper that was presented in the first one on Indian context. Silicosis? Silicosis or silicosis?
Silicosis.
Silicosis. Okay. So how what I did not know the word, to be honest, before reading this paper. I think this is very important. I think the paper was fantastic in a way that it has brought in light that how more novel techniques can be applied to understand the quality of parliamentary debates and how our policymakers can be involved in terms of issues of national or development importance. But I think the paper is still in progress. It is part of where you are also doing, and it's not. Is it completed? This is the whole scope of the paper, or is it part of your overall research?
It's part of my PhD.
One of the I think that is why it looked at. You will publish it in a separately, or will you publish together? What is the
Separate.
yeah. So first, my suggestion to you is to write clearly the objective. It is not written in that. So what is the objective and others? My way of reading a paper is that I try to read the objective first, so what it is trying to read the research questions or what in whatever manner. Then I try to look into that how the methodology is applied and whether those methodologies can actually answer my objective or research questions. That is how I see it. I think this is where I was a bit puzzled at what you are trying to accomplish. If you are trying to just identify that whether it was discussed or not, then it is, I think, quite well understood that we have actually measured there. I think for that, the paper itself has a very limited, it's a very limited. It can be a bit broader, and you have acknowledged that further research is required that how these discussions are going to be related on. I think that is where I think it is more important to make it more publishable. It has to have a bit more ambitious than that, just not to identify that how it is done. But the most important thing is that we have seen those spikes. Can you relate that whether something actually happened in the real world? Because parliamentary debates usually does not happen in isolation. Whether there was an incident it can be an accident, a collapse, something like that, or as you have also said, this can be part of, a result of awareness building. Or usually, politicians, in my experience, they are more reactive than proactive.
Okay.
So whether that is the case, or whether you can actually bring in measures that can make them more proactive before it hurts the incidents, hurts the people's lives. So that is, I think, those interpretation can be done. My comment on the sovereign default paper, fantastic paper. We all loved it. But I think the core comment for me is that for your consideration is that whether you will actually interpret political stability with the variable that you have used. A bit, I always, when we looked into this qualitative variables in quantitative form, be it quality or other governance database, I always try to look into the interpretation, what it actually defines, because the name can be a bit misleading. So for you, is a change in the support base, I think, is it changing the government, or how it is actually measured? I could not find it. I could not find the data. I had limited time. I should have put more time. But can you interpret that, how it is?
Yes. So depending on whether it's a full democracy, and there's a range that goes from full democracy to mostly an autocratic system.
Now, what about the change in the?
Yes. So in each of those systems, they interpret it slightly differently. So in a democracy, it depends on if there's a change in the party composition, if there's a change in the cadre composition, if it's a military government. Likewise, for each type of government, they have a different way of defining the support-based change.
Yeah. So
is it a quantitative score?
Yeah, quantitative score.
Gradation from 0 to something like that?
Yes, that I can understand.
Yeah.
So whether it is a sign of political stability or not, that is not, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so because the formation of political, say for example, coalition in a government, this can be simply interpreted. This is may not be political instability. So you can try to identify a different term maybe. So, but you didn't use much about the processions and other stuff.
There was one related to protests, but that wasn't very suitable for that kind of model because of the nature of the data. It didn't really match the assumptions of.
So you can bring it out from your presentation, because you when you throw that variable, I try to identify where did it go, because that is the more sign. Usually the protests are in are signs of political instability. So you probably tried to include it, but not. So I think this is very important, but that will also need to have a bit more look into your literature. Otherwise, it's a very good paper. The other comment that I would have, that you have also found, and that is very interesting, is that there is hardly an impact of inflation. Even it's a political instability or you see the anxiety of people comes with inflation in terms of economic variance. So loan default and may not be fully comprehended by general people in as such. So it is probably more a bit nerdy in many ways. My final comment on the project paper if his paper was too less, you were very ambitious. You have brought a whole buffet of issues in a single paper.
Yes.
And that is where I find it is a bit difficult. So you have put together too many objectives, too many things, and it is also not very well structured for a single paper. It may be a whole book. You can have different chapters, a volume. You can be very ambitious to come up with publishing it as a monograph or something. What is the plan?
Actually, we are working on that. It is the first draft, and we're still working on the paper.
I can see that. So it is probably if the paper from Dr. Richardson is very much, I think, at the finishing line, and there is no harm in it. Conferences are papers where you discuss those things. So I think you are putting together too many objectives, too many things on that. I think that is my first point. My second point, the methodology is sometimes a bit convoluted, where you are using what. So you are sometimes using some. For me, if you for example, on the projects, concentrate on the projects. Your chapter or the section on how you want to merge the ministries, or had no, I think, methodology as to how did you come up with those functions. Those may be absolutely true. Okay. I can most of them, but it was not necessarily backed in written, in articulated form by a thorough understanding of how to come up with it. My issue is that if you concentrate on the public picture, and some of the papers I think you have referred, I also did not find it. It was also, I mean, it is in the reference to, but it is not in text. I did not find them in text. And it is sometimes difficult. Too many Rahmans, too many something with M, something with S, which one to follow. I think that is where we should concentrate. Because I was trying to understand which paper is suggesting what, because it is heavily driven by literature. My suggestion to come up with it to have a more structured understanding when you evaluate the project. There are different, I think, papers on that, but I can give you a few suggestions. The first thing is that for any projects, public projects, you can look into from a more cost-benefit analysis lens. It can be financially or economically. So you can try to assess that. It's a bit difficult, but you can also use literature or try to also get the source documents, BPPs or feasibility studies, whether those are available there. The recent white paper is a good reference for you. You can use that in that way. The second one is more about the governance structure on it. So whether it was actually implemented following the procedures through a competitive process and others. Sometimes no competition, not following what we call the rules, can also deliver a project with high cost benefit. So I'm on a high benefit. But you can also follow that because it's not in. The third one is also about the priorities, whether it was important, if that was a priority or not. In terms of the, putting the public money. And the fourth one is on the satisfaction, what you have to do. But I think sometimes it feels that it is a bit judgmental. Any changes in, there will be winners and losers. So I think the best way to go is whether we have a collective welfare goals process. So if you say, for example, when we had the computers and we are all typing, some typists lost the job. That will happen. Mama Fedigat, some people lost the job. But whether we have put in more jobs because we had that. So you may be right, but your argument may be a bit faulty. And that then people will question, you cannot win the argument because not because your conclusions were wrong, because the way you have analyzed that. So similarly, satisfaction. People can be very satisfied with metro, but it can be, not necessarily financially feasible. People who were doing that, traveling to metro, can be very satisfied, but it may not be financially feasible. Similarly, in the prioritization model, that metro rail has given relief to probably thousands of people.
Yes.
But you know whether you can also look at the governance part of it, is that whether we could put that money building, putting them in quality education, that would probably bring benefits to, say, crores of people, not the lakhs of people who are traveling. So I think those are the different lenses that you could apply. So that in terms of methodology and articulation and others, that has to be a bit more concrete, and if you can slice the ambition a little bit more. Overall, my comments are fantastic papers. I think good understanding what we are dealing with our everyday life, the way we want to see our society, and particularly coming from political economy or development economics. This is where we should try to focus on, and I'm very inspired to see a lot of young researchers are putting their best time of their lives into this space. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. So now the floor is open for comments, questions, and we will have 15 minutes for that, huh?
Did I take more than 15 minutes? I was
I don't think
scared
so.
by the timekeeper.
No, that's,
Comments are very.
I would like to propose a big hand for the timekeeper.
just because he gave you much more time.
Thank you very much.
Like, I.
So you raise your hand and then, okay, first she will put question. Just
should I
tell
stand?
for whom your question is.
I'm Rashi. I'm from IIT Roorkee, India. And my question is to more like a suggestion to Mr. Malika.
Yes.
So I think you guys are graduate student, right?
Yes.
For that, it was a really nice presentation. But what I saw in your presentation that you were saying that in metro you showed entire blue graph and you said nobody is like everyone is satisfied, something like that, and then you pointed out some dissatisfaction as well. So graph is misrepresenting because the entire thing was blue, right? First thing that, and the second thing, what I would like to say is that you said you have conducted personal interviews as well. We are a student of economics. We need to state where did we do the survey? How many people were involved? How did you do it? Was it a structured questionnaire or not? You need to mention all those things and you need to clarify all those things. Otherwise, there is no relevance of your paper because you cannot justify, no? It's your words. It's just your words. How you should follow a systematic way of doing things, and you should mention all those things. So, thank you.
Thanks for good suggestions.
I am Arshad. My question was to Akash Pal. By the way, a very wonderful research paper. I had two sets of questions. One regarding your methodology. That is, why did you use structural topic modeling, and how does it compare to other topic modeling techniques like LDA? Regarding findings and your interpretation, what are the most significant shifts in parliamentary discourse on silicosis over time, and what external events influence these shifts? And an extra question, what patterns did you observe regarding the participation of MPs from different states, and what factors could explain regional variations? Thank you.
Many
And,
questions.
I had another question to Rosie. Are there differences in the impact of defaults on democracies versus autocracies? Would controlling for regime type strengthening the analysis? Thank you.
Who will answer first? Akash? Okay.
No, there is one more question.
No, let us take one question and then answer. If that is a question, then the author should be given the opportunity to respond.
So, the first question, why STM and not LDA? And look, there are other topic modeling techniques, correlated topic modelings and other. So the STM is good and better version of all the topic modeling methods because it uses the metadata of the document itself. By metadata, I mean the characteristic of the documents. Like in case of parliamentary debates, who are asking those questions, are those MPs female or male? Is it a lower house or upper house? When did the question was proposed? And where does those MPs belong to? So all these characteristic questions are not included in LDA or CTM. So, and the second, the external events, yeah. Like if you have seen in the 2018, so there was a high spike. This was a time period of the in India where in Parliament we were having reforms, labor reforms. So all the like 18 or 20 labor acts were being compiled into 2 or 3 labor codes. So this was a time and there was a high. And regarding 80s or between 2000, there were many studies by National Institute of Occupational Health and National Institute of Miners Health. They did multiple surveys in the mining areas and they found a high prevalence of silicosis. So, and as sir was pointing out, these local ground-based surveys made people, member of parliament discuss this problem in the parliament. So,
Okay.
regarding the third, the regional distribution of MPs, those MPs belong to Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and Gujarat. They were highlighting those issues more because they were the local people of where the problem actually exists.
Thank you. Do you want to say something about this question?
Please have the mic.
Okay.
Hello. So first of all, thank you for the question. I believe it was on the type of regime and how that affects stability, right? So the regime type was included as a control variable. And what the results showed was, yes, indeed, in more democratic countries, there was more instability. But I think we should also ask the question of, is that necessarily a bad thing? Because when there's a change in power, when there's protest, that's essentially democracy in action, right? If there is something that happens to the institution itself, that could be definitely a bad thing. But if people want to, say, protest against what they believe is a leader who is not competent, is that really a bad thing? So yeah, that is what I have to say about that. So essentially, yes, in democracies, there's more freedom for people to express dissent. And therefore, there is more instability in a way in those economies and countries.
Okay.
Sir, actually, I had a question. He asked me a question I had to answer.
Well, that was just a suggestion,
Okay.
not
We
question.
can talk.
You can talk with her later on.
Okay.
So I wanted to address the paper by Ms. Ekanaike. Excellent paper, excellent presentation. So your data ends at 2018. So I understand like finding data might be hard task, but I think if you can gather the data till 2024 at least, like you will see much more variation, much more interesting findings there. And to Tomalika, the paper, I think, as Tawfiqul Bhai was saying, so if you do like cost benefit analysis, something like, say, for instance, the metro rail, it costs a lot to run, but how much money is it making right now? Something like that. If you can do something like that, something. I'm an economics student, so I didn't see much number there. So if you could like present something like a table for each project, like how much it costs and how much it's making, and how much like kind of like how much money it is making for each money spent. So something like that. So that would be very useful. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Ruhani Rahmat from Department of Economics, University of Dhaka, and I had a question for Akash Pal. How were the exploded 137 parliamentary records assessed, and could their removal have affected the study's conclusion? That's how were the excluded 137 parliamentary records were assessed, and could their removal have affected the conclusion?
You were asking about the sample, how the sample was selected.
Yes, I hope I was clear.
So basically, when I mined the data from the digital census website, so they earlier before the 2000, they used to have the extracted version from the report itself. So they used to have some one page, they extract one page, and there were multiple questions. So only one was relevant to silicosis and others were like irrelevant. So I did check every question and like based on the title of the question and the question itself, and I then removed those irrelevant questions. But when extract those questions, all the questions are get extracted.
So you selected all the documents, huh? all the questions.
I put the query in the website and then they gave me those like 250 or around questions. So then
They're available all questions.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
My question is to Tomonika Sarkar. Tomonika, it was a nice presentation. But I just want to know, the study heavily relies on media reports and policy papers, which may actually introduce bias if the sources are not critically analyzed. And my question is, did you guys analyze those secondary sources? And I have a following question as well, that the study uses principalism theory or Keynesian decision. How does it justify why these were chosen over other governance and corruptions theories?
Okay, the first question is, did we analyze the secondary data? Yes, we analyzed the secondary data, but the sad thing is there is not much secondary sources, as we know that from 2009 to 2024, there's a one-party rule, and our liberation for research or media was quite limited. So people stopped restricted in a situation. So that is why we chose primary data more. We taken for data from the three or more sources, personal interviews, and we are planning to take expert interviews. As we already said, we are working on the paper. Then the second question, can you please repeat?
My second question is personal. You guys took to personal. So are you sure that they are not like biased, politically biased?
Okay, actually, we made a cluster sampling. For that, we have made small clusters, and we take mini representation from the cluster, and we go through the like grassroots peoples who are tea stall owners, hawkers, and I don't think they are much politically biased. Okay, the second question, you have the principalism theory. How we relate to the theory? Actually, in our principalism theory, we can see the principal delegate tasks to the contractors and our agents. Here, the problem is that contractors serve their own interest, not the public interest. That's the thing happened in the projects, especially in the Conflict Tunnel project, where agents make the interest happen, and the public, or we can say the aim of the project was commercial buses, trucks can use the tunnel and go to Dhaka to Chittagong to Cox's Bazar quickly. But the problem is facing, as shown from data collection, commercial bus drivers said that they have to spend extra 5 liter oil, they have to go extra 35 kilos to travel via the tunnel. That is the problem. That's how we relate to the actually principles and theory. Thank you.
Is there anyone who wants to participate through Zoom?
No, sir. There hasn't been
No.
questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have more time left.
We have gone through. We have to ask it. We have gone through actually.
2 minutes. So this is anybody else want to ask any question? Or otherwise, then I will conclude after him. Okay, one last question. But before that, you ask.
থ্যাংক ইউ স্যার। যেহেতু হচ্ছে মাতৃভাষা দিবসের মাস, তো আমি হচ্ছে বাংলায় বলে যাচ্ছি তমালিকা সঙ্গে আপু। আপু হচ্ছে আপনি আপনার পেপার খুবই ভালো হয়েছে। তো একটা টার্ম ইউজ করেছেন যে ইন পার্সন ডেভেলপমেন্ট, দেন পদ্মা ব্রিজের এখানে গিয়ে একটা টার্ম ইউজ করছেন যে নো সেটেলমেন্ট, রিসেটেলমেন্ট। তো হচ্ছে আপনি যদি ইন পার্সন ডেভেলপমেন্ট বলেন, তো এটা আমার দায়িত্ব যে আমি পার্সোনালি ডেভেলপমেন্ট করবো। বাট আমি মনে করি যে ওই টার্মটা ইউজ না করে আপনি যদি হিউম্যান ডেভেলপমেন্ট টার্ম ইউজ করতেন, এইটা বেটার হতো। আর ফেইলার প্রজেক্ট গুলো ফেল কেন হয়, যেমন আমাদের ডেমো ট্রেন ছিল, তো এইটা তো বন্ধ হয়ে গেছে, এইটা কেন হলো? এই রিজন গুলো যদি আপনার পেপারে ফার্স্ট একটু দিয়ে দিতেন, তাহলে আমাদের জন্য আরো আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ডিং হতো। থ্যাংক ইউ।
ঠিক আছে, নেক্সট ইউ।
I'm Samia Said Nice. I have a question for Jonathan Kojo Edemen. Your study does not explain why these 34 African countries were chosen. were they selected based on graphical diversity, governance scores, or economic size? Thank you. Richard Johnson.
Hello, I didn't get the question clearly.
Yes, we can hear you.
He couldn't hear the question. Okay,
Sure.
you can repeat, huh?
Yeah. So my question was, your study didn't explain why these 34 African countries were chosen. Were they selected based on geographical diversity, governance score, or economic size? Thank you.
Okay. And there's a selection. Yeah, we did a panel, a balance panel. So the countries were selected based on availability of data, especially in relation to the core variables of interest that we use in those studies, so that we don't run into problems.
Okay.
Hello.
Finish?
He's done.
He has not finished?
He has.
Okay, then we can, I can now conclude. I think I first want to congratulate all the presenters because they are, with respect to me, much, much younger. And I congratulated them because they have tried to do excellent job, and some have done really excellent job. Firstly, I will congratulate the Sri Lankan paper because it was, I think, very well done, and not only played with the numbers, but also tried to explain the numbers. Numbers only gives you correlation, but not causation. The important point is to find out the causation. And the interesting thing which he pointed out, that if there is democracy, then there will be more instability. But that will not be necessarily wrong or bad. That is a good thing, she told. And another thing she told, that in the middle income countries, when there is a default, then there is more instability aftermath. And that more instability can come from two sources. One, because the people are more conscious. That is an important point. And secondly, to negotiate with the donors or lenders, the middle income country will face more tougher conditions. So that's why for them, the adjustment will be more difficult, and instability may be more intensive. For Bangladesh, this has a good lesson to learn. Bangladesh was in the lower middle income phase of development, and if there is a debt crisis here now, then the conditions from IMF will be more tough, and that may lead to instability, higher instability. So this Sri Lankan paper, I think we should study more, and we can also learn from her two phases. One is before the crisis, and another is after the crisis. Our paper has concentrated on instability, but instability can be before crisis and after post-adjustment instability. Post-adjustment instability should be compared with pre-adjustment before crisis instability, and then we can further study the impacts. And Akash Pal's study will be more useful for us because it uses an exceptional novel method to analyze what kind of discourses are going on among a certain group of people. Is it MPs? Is it politicians? If we have textual report or text reports from any discussion group and use this method, then we can find out on which topics they are focusing. And from that, we can derive conclusions about their awareness and about their tendencies to make agendas. And Tamalika's paper, the main limitation was already expressed by our wise commentator, discussant. It was too ambitious. That is the main thing. Because one thing is you want to see what the bottom people are saying about the project. So you have a particular location, you go there, you ask the people, and as far as possible, you cover all kinds of beneficiaries and those who were harmed, both type of people, and get a report. Then that is a bottom view of the project. Another, you can see the beneficiaries who are now using that project, the metro ticket holders and who are now using it, or you can use the tunnel bus going through the tunnel, those beneficiaries, and find out whether they are satisfied or not. You can use a particular group of people who were ousted from the place but not rehabilitated. So these are different types of beneficiaries or cost burden sharers. So you can always do primary surveys and get the data about those things and summarize your findings. But that will not cover the cost benefit analysis. The cost benefit analysis in economics will be a comprehensive cost benefit analysis covering all those people's cost and all those people's benefits. So that, I think you will carry out this research more and complete it by synthesizing your isolated, fragmented findings. That will be more difficult to synthesize them and then coming to a ranking. Here the ranking was more provisional. You do not have a comprehensive cost benefit analysis of all the 3 projects. Unless that, you cannot rank them. Okay, and another paper was?
Nigerian paper.
Nigerian paper. I just was wondering about your comment also, the governance score. What this governance score is, how many variables are there, and how they are related with household consumption. Because governance can be related to household level consumption in many ways. First, after the climate crisis, if there is bad governance in distributing, mitigating policies and other things, social safety nets, then that governance crisis can affect household consumption. Or otherwise, in many other ways, governance can affect household consumption. Not only just climate hazard. So the relationship between climate hazard and household level average consumption is just a mechanical correlation. But you must bring in the governance factors one by one and correlate and find out the channel through which those governance variables affect the household consumption. Until that, it is just a number. Thank you. With this, again, congratulating everybody and Sanem also for giving the opportunity to me, especially to listen to young voices. Thank you all.
Some certificates for the.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks for the opportunity.
You have to give them certificate.
Okay, yes, nice. Happy to give you. You give some, I give some.
No, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay.